Hello, and welcome back to The Wrinkle. Today we're going to talk a little bit more about dementia, or major neurocognitive impairment. I'd like to talk about the symptoms that are common to most types of dementia. And we like to cluster them. If you know anything about medical people, they like to come up with short forms or little mnemonics, like little words that the initials mean something else, or acronyms. But what we're going to talk about today is the features of dementia that all start with the letter A. So these are the A's of dementia. So let's start with amnesia. Amnesia, which is forgetting. When we think about dementia or major neurocognitive disorder, the forgetting part is usually what people think of, right? We have all these little jokes about senior moments. So when we forget something, we call it a senior moment, or we say, oh, I'm getting Alzheimer's, or, something like that. But that's because that's kind of the symptom that most people think of when they think about dementia. And it certainly is very prominent in most types of dementia, especially Alzheimer's. So amnesia or forgetting can show up in mostly short-term memory, and the way that we test that would be giving somebody a list of 5 words or a certain number of objects, and then distracting that person for about 5 minutes and then seeing how many they can recall. So that is amnesia. And you can probably think of a lot of examples of how if a person is experiencing amnesia, it can get in the way of day-to-day life. The other thing that we may not think of as being affected in major neurocognitive disorder as often is language. And when language is absent or significantly affected by dementia, we call that aphasia. 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 So a lot of people will describe that as a word finding difficulty, and that can be a very socially disabling symptom of dementia. So many people will avoid social situations because they're concerned that if they can't find the word that they're looking for, others will notice, or that will just be very frustrating for them. So I know I was talking to a lady today who said, I'm really withdrawing from social occasions because I just can't find my words, and I'm worried that people are going to notice. And that's tragic because the ongoing social interaction is so important. The third A that we're going to talk about is agnosia. Agnosia. Agnosia is often mistaken for amnesia, and what it is a lack of recognition. So oftentimes people will feel like, hey, they forgot who I am, or they forgot where they live, if they're referring to the symptoms that they're noticing in someone living with dementia. And it could be that there's some amnesia there's some forgetting of familiar things, but it could also be just not recognizing those things anymore. This could be not recognizing familiar people or places, but it could also include not recognizing familiar objects. So in some people at certain stages of living with dementia, it could be having a comb or toothbrush and not really being sure what to do with it. That is because of agnosia. You may have seen our other video about Anosagnosia, which is not recognizing that one doesn't recognize. And that can be a very frustrating symptom as well, because that would involve the person who's living with dementia not really being able to understand the deficits and appreciate the challenges that are occurring because of those deficits. That's another A. That's an important feature of dementia. Another A is kind of difficult to define, but let me take a crack at it. It's called Apraxia. So praxis is doing something, and apraxia is difficulty doing something. That sounds kind of basic, but really what it is think about a task that you would do. So an example might be brushing your teeth. Again, so dental hygiene is very important to me. That must be why those examples are coming top of mind. So imagine that in order to brush one's teeth, we have to take the toothbrush, wet the toothbrush, take the toothpaste, put it on the toothbrush, then we have to brush for a certain amount of time, then we have to spit, then we have to rinse, then we have to rinse the toothbrush and put it away. So all of those steps are important when it comes to doing that task. In apraxia, a person has difficulty performing such a task, and it's not because of any other deficit. So for example, if a person is missing a hand or the hand has become paralyzed, well, that person might have difficulty with that task, but it's because they no longer have the hand that they used to do those tasks with. In dementia or major neurocognitive disorder, the person still has all the sensory modalities, all of the motor skills and strength that they need to do the task, but it's just not possible to figure out how to do it. That is apraxia. And we usually describe the apraxia as we'll say the task apraxia. So for example, having difficulty dressing is dressing apraxia. And you'll notice that medical people do is that if we want to make a little saying happen, so if we want everything to start with A, but we can't quite do that, that's not going to stop us. We're just going to make it fit. So the other thing that commonly changes in major neurocognitive disorder doesn't really start with A. It's executive function. But to make it start with A, we say abstract thought. It means the same thing. So that would be planning and executing something that is complex. So it's kind of like one step up from the apraxia. And that would show up in things like insight and judgment and complex planning. So there we might see people having difficulty with managing medications or managing finances. So the pieces of the puzzle might be there, but when it comes to putting it all together and executing and kind of having the insight to know if one is doing it correctly or not, then that can be impaired, and that would be an impairment in abstract thought. Usually we have to discern whether or not someone's having abstract thought challenges or executive function challenges by taking a history of how things have been going. So when you're learning about major neurocognitive disorder or dementia, that's one thing to really recognize, is that it's not just forgetting. There are other features too. So that would be amnesia, which is forgetting, aphasia, which is difficulty with language, agnosia, trouble recognizing, anosagnosia, which is changes in insight and inability to recognize deficits, apraxia, and changes in abstract thought. If you want to find more out about dementia, Alzheimer's, or any other type, Alzheimer's Society is an excellent resource. I'll leave a link to their Canadian website below, but they definitely have international websites and also regional ones as well. They are a wealth of information. They have a lot of very good scientifically based data about dementia and major neurocognitive disorder of all types, and a lot of support resources too. I'd love to hear what your experiences have been with these different features of dementia and whether you thought that there was anything or if it was just forgetting. Tell me if these other things kind of make sense to you based on what you've observed. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time on The Wrinkle.